Good evening to you all in La Piranta and good morning from San Francisco. I want to welcome you all to lecture 3 of our course module on marketing of high technology products and innovations. Today is going to be an extended session because we not only have to cover chapters 9 through 12, but we also have to go over the introduction to the case method. Now, I am hopeful that we will not need the full 3 hours, but we'll try to finish as soon as we can. And it's important that you understand the case assignment and also have an opportunity to ask any questions you may have. So in the first 2 hours, we will cover the chapter material, have discussions on distribution, pricing, branding and communications. And then after that, when we finish, we will go into introduction to the case method. I believe you have already, all the teams have been finalized and Hannes has communicated with you and distributed the cases. So that should be good for you to start preparing. So at this time, I would just like to know if you have any administrative questions to ask. I know Sana is online and both of us can be here to answer any questions you may have about administration of the course or the assignments. You can go to the chat box and then please address your questions to everybody so we can all see them. So at the moment, I will wait a couple of minutes and see if anybody has any administrative questions about any aspect of the course before we get into chapter 9. So I don't see anybody having any administrative questions. So I've shared my desktop with you all and we are here on the lecture number 3, 17/10/2018. I do see a question from Sana. Could you please inform more about the assignment? Yes, Sana, if you will bear with me, the first 2 hours we are going to discuss the chapter materials, and then at your 10 p.m. I will switch to a detailed discussion of the case assignment. So we have allocated, you'll see in the schedule up here, after all the chapters, there is an introduction to case method on the 17th from 20 to 2100. So I will go over that in detail. So please hold your thoughts until then. But thank you for asking that question. We will answer it. All right. So as we followed the practice in the first 2 lectures, since we have 4 chapters, I'll allocate about 30 minutes to a discussion on each chapter. And the first chapter is on distribution channels and supply chain management, chapter 9. I hope you've had a chance to read the chapter as well as view the online video. So now I'm opening it up to specific topics that you might like to discuss, like to have a discussion on. Anything that was more interesting, anything that was a little bit confusing. If you'd like some examples, please go to the chat box and then put in your comments or your questions to everybody so that we can see it. So right now I'll wait for a couple of minutes and give you a chance to type your questions or comments into the chat box. The topic is Chapter 9, Distribution. What are the topics that you would like me to address during this 30-minute segment? If any of you joined us very recently, I'm pausing now to invite your questions and comments on the chapter 9 on distribution. What are the topics that you found interesting or confusing that you would like some clarifications on? I'll give you a minute to type in your comments and questions, and then if there are no questions or comments, then I'll get into the PowerPoints and emphasize a few things that I feel are important in this chapter. So I don't see any questions or comments in the chat box. So I'm going to go to the PowerPoints and go through some topics which I think are more important and relevant and that you should know about. But again, if during this process you have any questions, please feel free to jump into the chat box and type away. Okay. So I hope you can see my PowerPoint slides. One of the most important issues is how to design a channel from scratch. Let's say you're a startup and then you're going international for the first time to a new country and you don't know much about that. How do you go about distributing your products? So we have this issue of designing the channel structure, which is how many different channels should you have and how many levels should you have in each channel. As you know, channel can be many stages. You can have suppliers, manufacturers, wholesalers, retailers, and so on. So the first important issue in channel structure is whether you should have a direct channel or an indirect channel, and what's the difference between each. So direct channels are where the company owns the channel. So a company direct sales force in B2B sales, it's very common. The manufacturer employs their own salespeople who call on large customers and persuade them to buy products and take their orders. There's other companies like Apple, which has its own company-owned website, apple.com. You might have seen some of the news that they launched, a few weeks ago, they launched some new products, the XS and the XS Max, and there are all kinds of complaints about the operating system being quite slow and the battery not performing as well. Tomorrow in the US, they're going to launch the XR, which is a more affordable product, and hopefully that will be better than the ones they've announced. So company website is direct, and then company owned retail outlets. Tesla, for example, doesn't have any dealers. It has its own company owned showrooms. And Tesla was inspired actually by Apple's showrooms. And that those are examples of direct channels. Now, the benefit of direct channels is that you have more control over the execution of your strategy because you're training your own employees, and you can motivate them better than going indirect through an independent distributor. So direct channels also lead to lower end prices for the consumer because there's not intermediaries in between who take some margin. So direct channels have that benefit as well, that it helps you to control the execution as well as the prices are lower to the end consumer. And opposed to that, you have your indirect channels. The channel members are like wholesalers, retailers, and they are independent businesses. And of course, the main advantage of indirect channels is that they are more cost efficient. You don't have to invest in real estate and hire your own employees, but you're leveraging the assets of the independent distributors or intermediaries. And another issue is that these intermediaries, they have some expertise, they have competencies in distribution. So manufacturers do manufacturing well, distributors do distribution well, and that becomes a good synergistic relationship. So here is what's called a hybrid or a dual or concurrent channel. These are multiple channels. Some of them, the manufacturer OEM to the end customer, that arrow is the direct channel, which could be a company sales force, a website, or a company-owned showroom. And then you have all these other types of intermediaries in between. There may be agents, brokers, or distributors. There may be resellers. Resellers are those who buy from the manufacturer and then they resell it. And there are some important types of resellers in high tech that we will get into. Now, what happens is that why does a company need to evolve in terms of its channels? A startup would probably like to start with some direct customers because they need to debug the product and they need to get good feedback from the marketplace. So initially you might have either a direct or an indirect channel. If you don't have much resources, you would prefer to have an indirect channel because it's more cost efficient. But the reason for getting into multiple channels or hybrid channels is that when you want to expand your market, both geographically as well as you want to penetrate deeper into any geography, that is, you want to go from the metro cities into the second tier cities and then into the towns and villages, then you need more penetration. So in order to penetrate deeper into a geographical market, you need longer channels. And if you want to do geographical expansion, you need more distinct channels. And that's why these channels evolve, the hybrid, dual, or concurrent channels. But the downside is that you might have your product available in so many different channels, and then the channels are all giving a different set of services and charging a different price. And that is what leads to what we call intra-brand competition. That is, the brand is the same, it's available in different channels that are charging different prices. And so the example that I would like to give you is that, some of the high-tech products that Apple releases, Apple will release it from its website at a particular price, but it will also make that available through telecom service of operators. So AT&T and Verizon in the US, they will be distributing the product, and they may give all kinds of incentives to their customers. They don't have to pay the full price up front, but they could bundle it with their service and say, every month you pay us $35 for the next 24 months to recover the cost of the phone plus the service. So you can see that the same phone is available in two different channels and they compete with each other. Intra-brand competition. So intra-brand competition has a problem because, very often the product is available at a lower price channel, and that when consumers go to that channel and buy, then the higher service full price channel gets affected negatively. So most manufacturers will try to minimize intra-brand competition and conflict. So if you have any questions on any of the topics in chapter 9, if you found something more interesting and would like to have that discussed, please enter it into the chat box. Otherwise, I will go through more of my PowerPoints. So each channel provides a subset of all the services available. These are the services on the slide that any channel could provide. A high-end channel will probably focus more on aesthetic appeal, on service, but a web channel might focus more on search, assortment, low price. So different channels offer different sets of services, and the number of channels you need is a reflection of the number of customer segments you have. So you should try to design your channels to meet the needs of unique customer segments. So have as many channels distinct as you have customer segments. I have a question from Yenny. Thank you for the question. How can companies manage or track this intra-brand issue and the costs of it? Thank you, Yenny, for your question. It's an excellent one. Most companies will have a channel sales force where those are specialized people whose job it is to meet these channel members on a regular basis. Because, the channel members are your most important B2B customers. So if you take a company like Cisco, they have an entire team globally and nationally where every quarter they are meeting their customers, the resellers on a regular basis, and they hear about these issues. Somebody complains, how come you are selling to this other reseller at a discount and I'm not getting that discount? So it's more of a relationship management issue. And almost every quarter there will be a big meeting. There'll be a proper trade show or a conference where all the channel members are invited, and the top management shows up, and they air their concerns, and they try to design policies and incentives which will try to minimize this kind of intra-brand competition. So for example, Cisco has a very good channel management policy that every reseller has a certain geographical territory assigned to it exclusively. But if the Cisco sales force, if the company sales force happens to make a large client or a large order in that territory, then that particular reseller will get the full compensation, the commission on that sale, even if they did not play a part in the sale. So Cisco guarantees the reseller that even if our company salespeople make a sale in your territory, you will get credit for that particular sale. So that's a kind of enlightened policy which helps to minimize the channel conflict or the intra-brand competition. Again, thank you for your question, and I really look forward to more of these types of questions, because this is a graduate seminar and you are responsible for your own learning. So please do ask, bring up issues which are related to your experience. If you worked in certain industries, if you worked in certain countries, and any of this theory does not seem to apply, then those are the interesting issues that we can try to discuss and draw some limits around the theories. So keep them coming. Okay, here are some typical or specialized intermediaries which we find in high tech. VAR or VAD is the same, value-added reseller, value-added dealer. These are independent companies who have a certain expertise. They will perhaps buy the hardware from a company like Cisco. Cisco sells switches and routers and internet infrastructure. These companies will add their own software and applications and then perhaps resell the whole package as a bundle to certain vertical markets. So there may be VARs for Cisco that specialize in the medical hospitals business, in that vertical. So they will install internet infrastructure for hospitals. That would be an example of a value-added reseller. A systems integrator is also a specialized intermediary. This happens for very large, complex projects. Let's say that Lockheed Martin is building a new stealth aircraft fighter for the Air Force. Then that's a huge project. It will take multiple years and, probably hundreds of millions of dollars. So then the Air Force will appoint Lockheed Martin as the systems integrator. And Lockheed Martin will then work with a number of different companies who are suppliers of all the components to build that aircraft. And once the whole thing is built, then the systems integrator turns over the completed product or the project to the customer on a turnkey basis. So systems integrators are, they in addition to just the cost of the aircraft, they're also given a handsome management fee for managing the entire complex project. And then, of course, there are these other channels, more traditional. Even in low tech, you have these types of intermediaries. Mass merchandisers are the really big discount stores like a Giganti or a Walmart. Category killers, they are specialized in particular verticals like Toys R Us, for example, or there used to be booksellers like Barnes and Noble, but they are facing some difficulties now with Amazon. And then the mom and pop stores are those family run businesses in some street corners. Franchises are very common, like Arkioski in Finland. So these are all the different types of resellers that we can have. Any more questions coming from the participants? Right. So here are now some of the factors that are affecting channel design in high-tech environments. Starting at the top, there's a blurring of distinctive members in the supply chain. Suppliers are becoming competitors and manufacturers are becoming retailers. So the roles are not clearly defined. So the implication of this is that, whatever stage of the supply chain or distribution network your company is in, you can expect unexpected sources of competition. None of the retailers expected Apple to become a retailer. In 2001, when they launched their company-owned stores, it took everybody by surprise because it was getting into a new business. And then we can have examples of, manufacturers getting into, the supply chain backwards and becoming their own supplier. So Apple at one time used to buy chips from Motorola. And even now, they still buy some chips from Intel, but they also design their own ARM chips in-house. They design them and then get them manufactured. So Apple became a chip designer. So again, there's a lot of flux that's happening in the marketplace. The indirect channels, there's so much competition that they need to provide value to the manufacturer. Otherwise, it becomes a complex management task just to let anybody carry your product. So if you want to position your product as a premium product, you need to limit the number of channels that it's available in. High-tech channels themselves are evolving due to new technologies. Consider how easy it has become to do e-commerce and have things delivered to your home. Think of, again, all the chat boxes that are available for customer service. You don't need an actual human being. Look at robotics in the warehouse. So these are all new technologies that are greatly changing the way companies do all their logistics and distribution. Gray markets is an interesting phenomenon which I would like to get to in a little more detail. Gray markets are intermediate between white markets, which are actually legitimate official markets, and then black markets, which are absolutely illegal. Black markets are like trading in guns and ammunition without a permit, or illegal drugs like all of the cocaine and banned substances in many countries, trading in prescription drugs without licenses. These are all examples of black markets. And again, there's so much of software available to optimize inventory and other supply chain management functions, which has become really important now. Okay, this is a really good graph which tries to explain how distribution channels need to evolve along with the product life cycle. in the introduction stage, it's better for the company to have direct sales to some of their important B2B customers. OEMs are original equipment manufacturers. This is a industry term for companies that manufacture the product themselves instead of outsourcing it. And then systems integrators. At this early stage of introduction, the product still is not fully debugged, and there's still some customization that may be required. And so you like to work directly with a small number of direct customers. Now, as you get into growth, then growth means the demand is assured, but you need to expand capacity, not only manufacturing capacity, but also distribution capacity. And that's where you need to increase the number of value-added resellers. And then further out, you're expanding. So you go to traditional retailers, maybe like department stores. And then when the market matures and you need to lower prices and cost, then you go to mass merchants like Walmart or Costco or Giganti. So you'll see that typically the channels in a high-tech industry, they go from being very closed and direct to opening up more and more in order to exploit the growth in both geographical expansion as well as penetration into markets. Now, in terms of the management of the relationship with your distributors and channel members, you can be unilateral, authoritative if you have a lot of power. Most large companies, Dell and Apple and Samsung, these companies have so much power that pretty much whatever they say, the supplier will comply. But a better long-term method of managing relationships is to treat each other as partners. We're all in this together, and then to try to build trust and adapt as the environment demands. Okay, there's a very important concept called the distribution of digital goods, the long tail. So this applies to digital products like music, videos, software, movies. So typically you'll see that for any marketplace like Netflix, for example, only 20% of the products are the big blockbusters, the big Hollywood hits like Hunger Games with Jennifer Lawrence. And then a lot of 80% of the products offered by Netflix are in the long tail. They are more the independent, low budget foreign films. And Netflix is very proud that it has built a successful business model by aggregating the demand for products in the long tail. This was not possible in the bricks and mortar retail world, because in bricks and mortar, if you want to stock more products, you need shelf space, which is always a constraint. It's expensive and you can't have unlimited supply. But when you're storing digital products, all you need is server space, and that's pretty inexpensive and easily available. So this is where, companies like eBay and like Netflix, they're able to stock a lot of, difficult to find items which are not easily available in the regular stores. So this is changing the economics of distribution of digital products. Gray markets. So I know this is something that is quite familiar to most people here. So I would like to pause and see if you can share some examples of the gray market. So If you know some good examples of the gray market, could you please type it into the chat box? That would make for an interesting discussion. So thank you, Sami, for your question. Can the long tail concept be applied to different businesses or industries than the digital ones? So it was originally formulated for digital products, and indeed the contrast is with bricks and mortar. So it's just saying that the economics of distribution of digital goods has changed very dramatically thanks to the availability of digital storage. One of the ways to think about how it might apply to the non-digital world is that you can have a bricks and mortar store in the downtown central business district, right? You can have a store in the city center in Helsinki, which would be very expensive, and then you're only able to carry a few of the hit products, the 20% of the red ones. Now, if you decide to go to a rural area and have a huge retail outlet in the center of Finland where the land is very cheap, then you could, expand the selection and make it available. And I believe there is some location in central Finland where one entrepreneur has built a huge bricks and mortar retail outlet where people can find goods very cheaply. So in that case, you can have the long tail as well if the real estate is cheap. But this definitely applies more to digital goods than to the offline world of distribution. Again, thank you, Sami, for your question. I'm still waiting to see if anybody has any good examples of the gray market. Could you please type it in? You must have experience of participating in gray markets. So, why don't you share your experience? So thank you, Maya, for your response. Maya says, in Syria, it is very common to have gray markets, and it was getting more legal because more of a mainstream, as most of the customers are unable to afford the brand. Okay, so one of the problems which Maya has surfaced is that the authorized distributors, they charge higher prices, and the gray market often charges lower prices. So it's consumers would naturally consider it in their interest to buy from the gray market. However, I have to ask, is there any risk to consumers from buying things in the gray market? What is the downside for a customer to buy something from the gray market? And Sana also gives this example of concert tickets. You can buy the concert tickets from the original promoter, whoever hosts the concert, or there are people who buy and resell those tickets on some other website or in private. So they become an unauthorized reseller. So those are all good examples. But tell me, what's the downside of a gray market to a consumer as well as to a manufacturer? Yes, Maisa. Maisa, thank you for your response. You have no warranty if the product doesn't work. And just think about it, if we are buying something expensive, an electronic device like a laptop or a smartphone for several €100, if we buy it from the gray market and it doesn't work, You go back next day, the gray market person may have disappeared. So you have no recourse. So customers can feel very abandoned. And Hannah says there are no guarantees. That's right. There are no guarantees for a product bought through the gray market. If you buy an Apple iPhone from the gray market, and then it's not working and you take it to an Apple store for service, they'll say, where is the receipt? We don't have any record of this having been purchased from Apple. So we are not going to give you the service. And Maya says the customer really needs to be careful because there's a huge chance of being scammed. Exactly right. Flight tickets, Sana says, the reseller has bad customer service, doesn't help if there's a problem. Absolutely. So you have all correctly pointed out the risks of buying from the gray market. So there's always a trade-off. The consumer has these risks, but the price is also low. And so you have to make that trade-off. Now tell me, why is a gray market a problem for the manufacturer of or the owner of the original brand? For sure, Apple and Samsung, they don't like gray markets. They want their product to be sold through the authorized channel. Why is that? Very good. So Hannah says it can damage the brand of the product. Absolutely right. And also, this will cause more intra-brand conflict with the authorized dealers. The authorized dealers will complain to Apple, we are providing all the service, and then the customers are going and buying it from a gray market, so you should shut down the gray market. Maya is right. It causes another type of competition. It can harm the brand image. So it can certainly harm the brand image, but it can also take away revenue and profits from the authorized distributor who can become demotivated to sell the product. So these are all good responses to the gray market. Another thing is that the gray market exists to some extent because of the supply constraints of the manufacturer. No company has the ability to, right from day one, to distribute products to all 170 countries on this planet. They have limited manufacturing capacity. So they will first release in a few countries. Now, there are gray markets where, we know, for example, that a lot of consumers from China came to the US to buy iPhones and took them back and sold them in Beijing and Shanghai. But when that happened, it becomes also a point of market research for Apple to know that there is a pent-up demand. If Apple finds evidence of the gray market in certain countries, it's an indication that perhaps they should expand their distribution and capitalize on that demand. So Amit raises a question. Can you please mention about the dark pools? It was not included in the lecture, but it is quite interesting. What is the legal issues with the dark pools, for instance, in the high-tech market? Amit, I'm sorry, I'm not getting the reference to dark pools. Could you explain what that is? Then I'll be happy to address it. Sana says, resellers make profit for products that were intended to be affordable in the first place. So, yeah, authorized resellers are authorized by the manufacturer and they can only stay in business if they make profit. So, again, I think you're referring to this arbitrage phenomenon that people will, buy from low-priced retailers and then sell it in in other countries where the prices are much higher in the authorized channels. Again, Amit, I would like you to please clarify what you mean by dark pools, because I'm not remembering what that terminology is. Is it something that you come across elsewhere? Can you provide me a reference, please? Or anybody else, if you understand what dark pools are, could you respond to Amit and perhaps clarify for me what a dark pool is? And if I don't know the answer, I'm happy to find out more about it and then reply to Amit by email. But I do need that. So thank you, Amit, for providing a clarification. Dark pools are used mainly in the financial sector, exchange of financial forums and website for trading securities. Might be different terminology. I remember it from my bachelor's degree in finance. So, Amit, again, thank you for bringing that up. I don't know enough about this right now, so it would not be appropriate for me to answer. But I will make a note of this, and I will try to find out more about it, and then I'll send you an email and perhaps post something in Moodle about it. At the same time, if some of you in among the participants knows anything about dark pools, perhaps you could reply to Amit right away. All right, thank you. Then I think I would like to finish off on this chapter and then move on to the next one, and that's going to be chapter 10 on pricing. So I would like to invite you all to please go to the chat box, and are there any interesting topics in pricing that you would like to bring up or ask for clarifications? I'm happy to do that. Right. So I hope you can see my PowerPoints on pricing. Maya, thank you for your question. I'm not sure this is this issue for this chapter. However, I was wondering how could companies let go of unprofitable customers without offending them or damaging the brand? Yes, in fact, this is a question for this chapter, and I'm glad you brought it up. We can certainly discuss this. Now because of different types of tracking software, mainly CRM software and marketing automation software, we have programs like Salesforce.com, Marketo, Eloqua, HubSpot. You actually have a case on HubSpot in this course. Companies are able to track the profitability of individual customers, especially B2B customers. And clearly, the thinking is that you do an analysis of the profitability of your customers, and you will pretty much come across this 80-20 rule. That is, only 20% of your customers are really profitable, and maybe 80% of your customers are either breaking even or they might even be unprofitable. So it's part of the targeting decision not to serve every customer, and especially the unprofitable customers. And so you have to, you have to either convert those unprofitable customers to becoming profitable, or you have to ask them to go in a kind and gentle manner. So the question is, how do you do that? So the first approach is, can we lower the cost of serving unprofitable customers? And indeed, that ties in with the distribution channel decision. If your customers are unprofitable, don't send your direct salespeople to call on them, because that's so expensive. Instead, you might tell them, you please order from the web. The web is a low cost direct channel. So that's how you can try to make your unprofitable customers profitable, by lowering the cost to serve them. However, even if they are unprofitable, even if you can't lower the cost anymore, then you do have to sometimes fire customers. And there are many examples of how this has been done in practice. There is a telecom service provider in the US called Sprint. It's like the fourth provider. First is Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and then Sprint. And Sprint found that some years ago, that when it analyzed its customers, some of the unprofitable customers, they were making more than 20 customer service calls per month to the telephone support line. Okay. So more than 20 customer calls per month means actually one call per day if you're working Monday through Friday. And so, these were low revenue customers, and they were making so many customer calls. So it actually sent a letter out to all these 1,000 customers saying, thank you for being a loyal customer of Sprint since so and so year. We understand that you have been having some technical issues which require you to call us, more than 20 times a month. Obviously, we are not able to meet your needs. So we would like to give you notice that after 90 days, we will discontinue service. But we also strongly recommend that you please subscribe to our competitor, join AT&T or Verizon. That's a smart move. You're getting rid of your unprofitable customers and you're asking them to join the competitors. And this is becoming more and more common. Remember that targeting means you got to choose your customers carefully, and it's not always possible to make the correct decision up front. So when you find that there are unprofitable customers, you have every right to ask them to discontinue, but you have to follow proper protocols, give them enough notice, give them suggestions for how they could continue receiving the service from somebody else. Otherwise, you risk you risk getting some negative press and publicity, because if you're found to be unfair, then the media, the TV and the newspapers, they like to project those stories against the company. So again, you have to be careful of that. So that was a good issue. Thank you, Maya, for bringing that up. Do you have any other issues? Anybody wants to discuss particular topics in pricing? If not, let me go through some of the important things in this chapter. So first, again, I want to emphasize some of the important factors that affect the pricing decision in a dynamic, uncertain environment. So starting from the top, we know that, product life cycles in a technology business, they're getting shorter. So there's less time to recover all the fixed costs upfront. That means that new products, radical products, breakthrough products, they usually have higher prices because you have to recover the fixed costs in a shorter period of time. The next factor on the right is Moore's law. Moore's law was formulated by Gordon Moore, one of the founders of Intel. And he said that every 18 to 24 months, the performance to price ratio of a integrated circuit will become half. The performance to price ratio will become half, which means that if you keep the performance the same, then in 18 to 24 months, your price will become half. So this is one of the unique things in high tech, especially in hardware devices. The prices keep falling every year. And that's partly due to Moore's law. Network externalities, you remember, is about the value of the network increasing exponentially due to the number of users. So this property of certain technology platforms means that you have to get big fast. And that means you have to price low, almost give away things free like Facebook and Google, because you want to build that huge network. So network externalities put downward pressure on prices. Unit one costs, if they go up, then prices go up. Customers' perceptions of cost and benefit. This is, so important. Whenever you are trying to price a product, you try to find out the total value of the benefits. And then if the value is high, you can price higher. Competition, we know competition and the internet put pressure downwards on prices. If you don't have backward compatibility, if you're bringing out a new platform which is incompatible with the previous generation, then it's a disadvantage for consumer adoption because people have already invested in the legacy system and all the accessories and peripherals and so on, software. So if you're not going to have backward compatibility, you need to price the new product lower. And again, investments in R&D are, if they are high, you need to price more. If there's rapid pace of change, you might need to price higher. So these are some of the factors that will affect pricing in a high-tech environment. Here are the 3 C's that affect pricing. Very, very clear. Costs set the floor on pricing. Customers' willingness to pay sets the ceiling. And then your positioning strategy sets, your positioning strategy should take into account how you price compared to competition. If you want to be premium, you price higher than the competition. If you want to be on par, you price on par. And if you're a startup and you're just entering the market, you may have to price lower than the competition. Experience curves. This is a very important concept in this chapter. Let's focus on the right diagram, which shows it's simpler to understand the linear relationships. The top black line is 90% unit cost, which means whenever cumulative production doubles, then the new unit cost will be 90% of the old unit cost. The red line is 80%. The bottom dotted black line is 70%. So usually high-tech products have a steeper experience curve. And the cause of the experience curve is that the processes turn out to be more efficient with experience. So workers, they understand how to build the product better and cheaper and faster. Think of how Tesla is dealing with production hell right now. It has increased its production from about 2,000 cars per week, to about 5,000 cars per week. And that can only be done by learning and experience. So the implication of the experience curve is that if your experience curve as a manufacturer is steep, then you can be more aggressive about pricing. You can price things low because you know that your costs are going to decline in the future and your margin is going to increase. Reference price. This is a very important pricing concept. Reference price is the standard that we as consumers use that's coming from some source, internal source, either prior experience or by your research on competitors' prices. Every one of us knows that we want to pay a certain amount for a smartphone or a laptop or an automobile. Now, if you don't have prior experience and you don't do the research on what current competitors' prices are, then very often you have to use the current purchase environment to fix the reference price. So that's why you'll see all these signs, especially in bricks and mortar retailers. Ale in Finland, the sale, right? It was 100 euros. Now it's 79 euros. They'll cross out the 100 euros. So for an uninformed customer, it's the $100 crossed out that becomes the reference price, and somebody might consider it a bargain and then buy the product. So reference price is something that can be influenced by the marketeer. Again, in durable high-tech products or software services, the total cost of ownership is not just the acquisition price, but it must also include the total cost of acquisition, maintenance, and disposal over the life of the product. And this becomes an important competitive strategic pricing issue. This is the point in this slide that we were talking, Maya, in response to your question. Now we're able to track profitability of individual customer accounts, and some of them are not worth it, and they have to be discouraged in a kind and gentle manner to discontinue. Now I come to an important topic, which is called the technology pricing paradox. And the paradox is this. In high tech, we know that prices decline every year. It's a fact. You know, a very common metric that many companies use is average revenue per user, ARPU. And they report this every quarter. You take telecom service providers, average revenue per user, it declines very regularly. And this is very different from traditional industries. In any other industries, if prices were declining so systematically, it would cause havoc in the industry. You know how last couple of years, the price of oil has been declining, not in recent months, but that caused, huge turmoil. Basically, the price of oil went down because of a new technology called fracking, which became available, and the supply of oil had increased. And that caused so many repercussions throughout the economy. Real estate, if you take the price of homes, if they keep dropping, then that has huge repercussions. But the technology pricing paradox is that even in an environment of falling prices, sustained falling prices, businesses can survive and thrive if they take certain strategic actions. And those are the solutions to the technology pricing paradox. The most important is you have to keep costs falling faster than prices. So exploit the experience curve. Sony as a manufacturer is a master of the experience curve. When it launches a new video game console, it will price it quite low, you know, $250 for maybe a PlayStation 4. And the actual cost of manufacture may be higher than that. But Sony knows, because of its experience curve, the next year the cost will fall. So even if you maintain your flat price at $250, the cost will come down and you'll get increasing margins in future years. So the way to keep costs falling faster is exploit the experience curve, make process improvements, cut out waste. These are the ways of doing it. Avoid commodity markets, which means you maintain a steady stream of innovation. Every year, you need to come up with incremental innovations. And hopefully, every 3 to 5 years, you can come up with some breakthrough or radical innovation that will differentiate your offerings. Another process improvement that can help you avoid commodity markets is called mass customization. This means, the problem with customization is it's very costly. If you have to tailor a solution for each separate customer, your costs are going to go up. But mass customization is giving the impression to the customer that you're letting them choose whatever they want, but you're trying to maintain costs low with the help of technology. So Dell and Amazon are good examples of mass customization. Dell actually lets any consumer on the web go and order any configuration that they want. You can order a specific CPU, a specific operating system, different types of storage and peripherals and things like that. And then Dell will ship you the order within 48 hours. And the way Dell is able to do this is through a good process. They maintain inventory of components and sub-assemblies. They don't maintain the finished goods inventory. So they'll have a stock of CPUs, storage devices, operating system, and then put it all together. So it appears to be customized, but it's really not expensive. And Amazon does similar things with regard to their emails and the offers that they make through the emails. They address you with your first name as if they are quite friendly with you. You might think that every email from Amazon is coming from Jeff Bezos because they know so much about you and he signs the email. But actually, they're just using a database. And so it's not that expensive. You need to find new revenue streams, find new uses for existing products, build out the product so that you offer and meet more of the customer's needs, offer value product bundles, enter new less price sensitive segments, offer product derivatives. Derivatives are variations of the platform. Maybe you can tweak performance a little higher or a little lower and charge different prices. That's called price lining. So I would like to pause here and ask you to give me examples of any of these new revenue streams. Can you give an example of a brand or a product that has found new revenue streams from your own experience? So I'm requesting any example to illustrate your understanding of how might a company or a product or a brand generate new revenue streams using any of these approaches. Or let me frame the question a little bit differently. You all know iTunes. iTunes has existed quite a long time. Actually, let me go to Lisa. Lisa says Uber and Uber Eats. Right. So Uber's main service is to give rides to people. But now in some of the non-peak hours, they actually deliver food for the restaurants. So that's an entirely different customer. The restaurant is paying Uber to deliver those that the food, or even it may be consumers who pay for it, probably both. So that's a new revenue stream. And which approach does it illustrate? Um, it's a new use for an existing product. The cars and the drivers are the same, but instead of transporting passengers, they are transporting food. So that's a good example. I was talking about iTunes as an example. We know iTunes has existed since 2002. Apple had some licensing agreements with many of the music labels to offer their music and videos. But then Apple bought Beats a few years ago. Beats was an independent company. Why do you think Apple bought Beats when it already has iTunes? Can anybody try to answer that question? And they bought it at a very hefty price. So are they doing it for revenue and profit considerations? For sure. Which approach does that illustrate? If Apple went into buying Apple Beats, in addition to whatever they had in their iTunes catalog, what does that signal? Which approach does that illustrate? So I think Apple, yes, product bundles. No, not really. I mean, it's still, it's got integrated, but they, earlier they were doing iTunes downloads, and now they have a subscription service. So I don't think you have to do one or you don't have to do both. As a consumer, you can still download and you can choose not to subscribe to Apple Beats and vice versa. So I would not consider it a bundle. However, Beats had a very, very different consumer profile. It was much younger consumers who were not in the Apple iTunes, existing customer base. So it was a way for Apple to get into a new, less price sensitive segment. The young kids, they buy a lot of music. And so they were really getting a new revenue stream which justified even the higher acquisition cost, because if it's subscription based, then you're getting much more revenue per user than you were under the download model. So I think my analysis is that Apple bought Apple Beats to get into a different segment of music consumers, younger, those who are more into hip hop and other genres of music and videos. Okay. So that's about it in terms of, there's a couple more solutions. If you develop long-term relationships with your customers, then they will pay you a premium for that relationship. They won't nickel and dime you. Then you can use smart dynamic pricing, which means you vary the price depending on how sensitive the customers are, whether it's time of day. Peak times you charge more, other times you charge less. That's called dynamic pricing. You try to match supply and demand at the right price. And the final one is, if you can be agile and quickly bring new products to market, then it cuts down the entire product launch, the product development and launch cost. And that can help to lower the cost of the product. Okay, with that, I'll close out this chapter on pricing, and then we'll go to the chapter on to the next chapter. Please give me a moment. Chapter 11. Right. So here is the chapter 11. We'll discuss some tools first, all the different tools that marketers can use for communication. And then chapter 12 is about branding. So I know a lot of you have interests in perhaps social media marketing and are maybe doing already internships or work in those kinds of areas. What are some of the topics and questions that you might have regarding marketing communication tools? Anything that you read in the book or the video that you might like some clarification on, please go to the chat box and let's start out with some topics that are of interest to you. Marketing communication first, just the tools, and then we'll get into branding a little bit later. Okay, here's one from Yeni. Not really a question, but interesting how the online advertising tools have changed in the past years. Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is the challenge, of the technology being in so much of a flux. We had a lot of good theory on traditional marketing, but now the developments in the field, in the practice, they have accelerated so much that it's really very difficult as managers or as academics to follow those trends and see, are they robust or are they just a passing fad? Because it's important to discriminate between those two. If something is not going to last very long, then we don't need to bother about studying it and understanding it that much. But then some other trends are so robust that we better understand it and try to capitalize on it. So thank you. I agree with you that this is a fast changing area of practice, and it is a little difficult. We must all acknowledge that it is difficult for us to keep abreast of all these changes. It's just not physically possible. Just think of the evolution of social media, the bigger platforms. Clearly the big ones right from quite long time ago are LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, right? But very soon after these three were launched, you had all this excitement about Instagram and WhatsApp, and Facebook bought both of them. I have a former student in my class who said that he was actually a creative director for an ad agency, and they were bidding some for some big client, they wanted to get the contract for doing all of their online advertising. And at that time, Instagram had just been launched. It was still independent, but the amount of volume, the growth, number of users were increasing every month by huge amounts. And one of the younger people in his staff was arguing, oh, we must do something about Instagram in the campaign. It's not enough to do Facebook. We must do Instagram. And he told them that, we should wait at least 1 year to see whether this platform survives or not. Because, the earlier experience was that MySpace was huge, but it came and went because Facebook just destroyed it. So again, I think it's good advice for all of us not to get too carried away by what's the flavor of the month. And indeed, I would submit to all of you that whenever there are these new platforms and new technologies that are being offered to us for exploration, see at least whether it lasts for 1 year, because within that 1 year, you could make good judgments about whether it's on a growth path and will continue, or it may fall into the chasm, in which case it's not worth worrying about. Good question, good observation, Yenny. Thank you for that. Anybody else have any things they would like to share, any observations with regard to marketing communication tools? It is to Facebook's credit that they actually were able to spot the potential of Instagram and WhatsApp fairly early and buy them and integrate them into their operations. There's another company called Snapchat, which is a rival to Instagram, but it's struggling and it wants to be acquired, but nobody's yet acquired them. So again, we see so many dynamics of competition in these markets. Okay, let me go into some of the important issues and make some comments about the marketing tools mix. It's very clear that, we understand better all the traditional offline marketing. The online marketing, as we have noted, has a lot of tools that keep changing. But I think the starting point for any marketeer should be the website. The website is owned media. You own it yourself. And so you can control it. You can put as much information as you like. You can make it as clear as possible for your content to be discovered in natural keyword search. So, even though some people now say that website is passé and it's all about mobile, I still think that you need to start with a very strong website. And of course, if you have a good website, you can convert that into mobile pages. So there's not much difficulty there. But everything you do in terms of content management starts with your website. And even if you participate in blogs and groups and other things outside your website, your attempt should always be to link it back to the content on your website, get people to register on your website, because once they register, then you can track them and then you can give them more information as they go through the sales cycle. And in fact, there's a very good framework in this chapter about how to design good websites. So I would like to perhaps go there. Yeah. So this is the 7 C's framework of designing a website. It's a marketing framework. I'm sure there are much more detailed, templates and frameworks in UX testing, user testing, which are more complicated than this. But I think it's good for marketeers to have an understanding of the 7Cs framework. Content is what you actually put on your website in terms of text and graphics and audio and things like that. Context is the layout. Is the site easy to navigate? Is it very cluttered? So you must have some consistency between those two. Community is so important. Community is having a blog on your website instead of outside. And, there have been many case studies of companies like eBay where if you have a robust community, it can cut your customer service costs because the community members help each other and answer each other's questions. Commerce applies to certain websites where you have e-commerce. You will need certain features like a good catalog and then shopping cart, accepting different kinds of payments. But of course, not all websites have e-commerce capability, neither should they. This is just a comprehensive framework. Communication is communication between the users and the website. So is there an email address that you can contact the webmaster? That's one. But more and more, we are seeing that users want direct contact either through a telephone number or even a chat box. Customization comes when you're able to have people register and choose their interest areas, and maybe the layout of the content is changed depending on your interests. So many newspaper sites will have this capability where if you say you're interested in sports or technology, then those news items will come up first before all the rest. And then connection is connecting you to outside resources. If there's some information that's not available on your website, can you help the user find it somewhere else? And at the bottom there with the asterisk is the most important principle. All elements have to be consistent with each other and they must meet the needs of the target. So, from a marketing perspective, the website should be considered an offering. And you have to design it to meet the needs of the audience. So you have to think through the issues of segmentation, targeting, and positioning before you design your website. Okay, I have a question from Hannah. Can you re-explain the connection bit? Sure. So the connection, Hannah, is the connection to other information sources which are outside the website. So, that there is one point of view that you must keep everybody on your website, right? That's the stickiness of the user. The longer you keep them on your website, the better it is. But again, if you consider the needs of the user and you want to be responsive, let's say they can't find something on your website, then is there some other website that you could refer them to? And that would earn you some goodwill. Even if they don't buy from you, at least they can find it somewhere else. Amazon has evolved in so many ways, but one of the really breakthrough innovations they did was that they invited third-party sellers onto their website. Before that, if you didn't find a product on Amazon, they would actually refer you to some other competitor's website. And that might seem counterintuitive, but in the long run, people will appreciate it and they might come back to Amazon when they find that that's the first portal, the gateway to shopping on the internet. So there are many ways to do this connection. It's just like if you go to a store, you go to a store, a bricks and mortar offline store, and you ask them for something, they say, sorry, we don't have it. But then you ask them, where can I get it? If that salesperson tells you, oh, across the street, you might try that store, then it certainly creates a positive brand impression. Okay. So are there any other questions or comments you have about any aspect of offline or online marketing? I mean, communication. We are on the topic of communication. I want to go back to this issue of integrated marketing communications. When you're a global company and you're operating in so many different countries and you have many different business units, you have literally hundreds or thousands of products, you have so many ad campaigns going on simultaneously. The challenge of integrated marketing communications is to deliver a consistent message to your target audience no matter where they are. And that's such a big challenge. You have to be consistent across different products, across different campaigns, across different business units, and across different geographies. And you might have your own experiences. You travel to a different country and you experience a product and you say, oh, this is so different from my experience back home. That's where you're not getting an integrated experience. The more seamless we can make the experience from first exposure to post purchase, the easier it is for the consumer to engage with you and become a loyal customer. Viral marketing, again, it's a very interesting concept. Normally we think of viruses as being negative, that the flu virus, it can make us sick for a few days. But in this context, viral marketing is positive because it means a marketeer can use technology to spread their message very quickly. And there are so many good examples of viral marketing on YouTube. You might have heard of the ALS challenge, where celebrities, they dunked water from a bucket on their head and donated money and passed on the challenge to their friends. And, it was the family of a patient who had this ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, who collected really hundreds of millions of dollars for their foundation to do research on finding a cure for ALS due to viral marketing. So viral marketing is where if you have a low budget, your creativity can help you make up for the lower budget. But it is a challenge. You have to really think of creative ways to get your message across. Yeah, there's been lots of talk about using mobile advertising. We see now two types of mobile advertising. One is the companies with whom we have already a relationship. If we've signed up with permission, they send us text messages. Typically the telecom service providers, they tell us when we're running low on balance and to top it up and so on. But there's also now lots of display ads on mobile. They are limited in terms of what they can show, but even if you watch YouTube on a smartphone, you can see the ads at the bottom in terms of a sticker. So there is a lot of potential for this. Our mobile devices are very intimate and personal, and we carry them with us all the time. But we have to worry about irritating consumers if we overuse this as marketeers. So just in the last 90 minutes, as I've been talking to you, I got two interruptions on my Apple Watch, and both of them were from telemarketers, and I shut them off. So we have to be very careful, and there's a lot of concern from consumers about protecting privacy and confidentiality of information. And then we've had so many breaches and hacks and blatant violations where Facebook has shared information, private information, with third parties in an unauthorized manner. And I'm sure they're going to be fined quite high in terms of those violations. So there are a number of issues. We have this potential to do all this online advertising and mobile advertising, but we have to use it very carefully and be very respectful of consumer right to privacy. Okay, I think I'll close out this particular chapter as well. And now the final chapter is strategic issues in marketing communications, and I'm mainly going to focus on branding here. Branding is a huge topic in marketing, and it's of great interest to so many people. I'm sure you are all good students of branding as well. What are some of the topics that you found interesting in the video or in the book that you might like to raise now? Please go to the chat box. Any comments, any questions, please feel free to make them now so we can discuss them for another 23 minutes or so. Okay, so to start off the discussion and give you some things to think about, this is the latest 2018 survey of the best global brands in the world. And this is an update on what's in the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint is a few years old, but here let's focus on the top 10 brands. You have Apple, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Coca-Cola, Samsung, Toyota, Daimler-Benz, Facebook, and McDonald's. You can see that out of these top 10 brands, at least 6 of them are clearly high-tech. Apple, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Samsung, and Facebook. And one might argue that even Toyota and Mercedes-Benz are quite high-tech. In fact, Toyota has launched a hydrogen fuel cell car in the US called Mirai, Mirai, which is much more high-tech than the electric vehicle that Tesla makes. So if you do that, then there's 8 out of 10 brands. Coca-Cola and McDonald's are the only consumer packaged goods companies. And how this has changed, I can't tell you. In the last 20 years, at one time, the top 10 all consisted of Coke and McDonald's and Disney and so on. Now, what do we find is that the top brands in the world are high-tech brands. And this is also reflected in, stock prices and gains. Of course, it's very volatile, but, there's a lot to be said in terms of these top 10 brands. At one time, for many years in the seminar, this particular course, Nokia was always in the top 10 for several years. Motorola was in the top 10. BlackBerry was in quite high, but over the years they have declined, and other brands have risen. Samsung in particular has done an amazing job. 30 years ago, people were very suspicious of Korean products. The quality was suspect. Samsung actually did a brand audit with Sony. Sony was so high and Samsung was so low. And continuously Samsung has improved its brand, and now Sony is fallen. Where is Sony? Let's see in this. Oh my goodness. Sony is number 59 and Samsung is now number 6. This is a tremendous reversal of fortune that I could not have expected, 10 or 15 years ago. So again, it shows that with careful investment, brands can be developed and nurtured, and that they can give phenomenal returns to a company. So again, I just started out with that. Let's go to the chat and see if you have any comments or questions. What are the issues in branding that are of interest to you? Anything at all? Thank you, Maisa, for your comment. I think branding has changed a lot during the past years. Since the product quality is similar among competitors, you have to make a difference with the brand. It's becoming more and more important. Absolutely. However, I would also like to say that the product experience is a big contributor to the brand. And so if I could again go back to some theory here and draw your attention on how to build a strong brand. Here are the 4 guidelines on how to build a strong brand. First, you have to start with the brand elements. You have to have an attractive name, a logo, a symbol, or a slogan. It has to be catchy. It has to catch people's attention. Think of a startup. Nobody knows about you. You want to have an attractive brand name. Then comes the usage experience, and clearly the product experience is a huge part of the user experience. Now, to Maisa's point, I think hardware can be commoditized, but a lot of the experience differential can come from software, apps, and customer service, so that you can really differentiate all of these experiences. You take the example of cloud storage. There are so many aggressive competitors, but Amazon with its AWS has become quite, a market leader. Google offers hosting services. IBM offers the same web services. Hewlett Packard. There's no shortage of large companies that are offering this. And yet people feel that Amazon has the best experience, the one that's easiest to use. You can be off and running and get your website hosted very quickly. So that's where, I think that product still matters, but product is like a common denominator, the hardware product. And then the software and services are a layer that could help you differentiate your product. Again, third point is very important. Your employees can be really your brand ambassadors. So if you select your talent well and you train them well, when they get up and speak at trade shows and conferences and they make presentations, your people can help you differentiate your overall experience. How How sophisticated are your salespeople in being able to understand customer needs? Do they make an impression when they first present themselves to customers? Those are aspects of employees being brand ambassadors. And then finally, associations with other entities. That is, you might, if you have money, you can sign up a celebrity endorser. But if you have budget constraints, perhaps you can tie in with some CSR efforts, some charitable events in your local community. We have Salesforce.com in San Francisco, which does so much for the local issues, homelessness, and donating money to buy equipment for public schools. Salesforce is considered a very good corporate citizen in San Francisco. So this is how you can really try to build a strong brand. When you're a startup, you start with step number 1, brand elements, and then you go down the list and try to leverage all the other aspects. What else is important for you to know about branding? We can continue to have your questions and comments. In high tech, particular drivers of the brand are changes in the innovation roadmap. I'm just reading some news stories that both Samsung and Apple, they are getting into something called a foldable screen. The patents have been filed that both these companies want to get into reducing the form factor. Instead of a smartphone, which is usually a monoblock, they're now thinking of having foldable screens, OLED screens. So whenever there are those kinds of discoveries of published patents or any news items, we think those companies are on the leading edge, and that helps their brand. Changes in top management, the personalities of the CEO sometimes do rub off on the brand. Sir Richard Branson for Virgin, or Elon Musk for Tesla. These are personalities which are celebrities in their own right, and they also get to contribute to the brand. Competitor actions, if your competitor comes out with a hard-hitting ad campaign, that can affect your brand. Or if the competitors take some legal actions, lawsuits are perceived negatively and have a negative impact on the brand. So these are all specific aspects in high tech that affect a brand. Here are some more important guidelines for high tech. Branding is more important for high tech innovations than incremental products. That's because high tech products have a lot of uncertainty. So branding is a way to reduce the uncertainty, because a brand is a reassurance of quality to the consumer. Maya, you have raised a question. Can you please share the slides? I believe the slides are already in Moodle. So if you go to lecture 3 in Moodle, you can download the slides from there. Oh, do you mean that right now you cannot see them? Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot that. So let me do that right away. Can you see the branding strategy slide right now? And thank you, Maya, for bringing that to my attention. Now, building a strong brand is not cheap. It requires investment long term. You're not going to get short-term increases in sales. And if you're a startup and you don't have the budget to invest, then you have to have creative methods like viral marketing. making making a video on YouTube, doing a flash mob with your employees. These are creative ways in which you could try to build the brand even with a low budget. Create a steady stream of innovations with a strong value proposition. Again, the value from the product and the experience will contribute most to the brand. Emphasize advertising rather than price promotions. Price promotions are temporary discounts and coupons and rebates. They will help to move sales, but they are not good for the brand because they can dilute the brand equity. Consumers will start questioning, why are you discounting the product because it's not selling? Certainly now brand includes two-way conversations with people in social media, whether they are your actual consumers or the general public. There's been huge investments in social media to monitor brand conversations. There's a tool called sentiment analysis where companies can analyze what's being said on their Facebook page. Each of the comments can be categorized as positive, negative, or neutral. And if there are negative comments, they can be flagged so that a customer service representative can reply to the consumer and say, okay, please call this number, we'll take care of your issue right away. So more and more, what's changed about branding is that it's become a two-way conversation between the brand owner and consumers. Traditionally, it was more one-way. Now we want to influence the influencers, especially on blogs. There are so many influential bloggers who write reviews about products and services, and we have to try to influence them and then think strategically about CSR efforts, corporate social responsibility. Brand the company, platform, or idea rather than the specific model or item. You'll see this is quite a robust trend. Whenever smartphones come out, the specific model for the year has a number. Galaxy 9, iPhone 9, 7, 8, 9. Because the models and the items keep changing quickly. But the platform lasts a longer time. Galaxy is a platform. iPhone is a platform. Okay. And the company certainly lasts many decades or even a century. So there's the corporate name, Apple and Samsung. There's the platform name, which is either iPhone or Galaxy. And then there's the model number, which keeps changing much more easily. You need to invest more in the higher order company platform because that will give you a return in a longer term. And ideas also can be branded. Open source software is kind of a brand. It gives you the idea that nobody owns it and everybody is most welcome to contribute to the code. There are so many ideas that get branded. One from the consumer domain is the Got Milk ad campaign. This was all the dairy farmers in the USA got together, and the idea was to promote milk as a category or as a product, not specific brands. So you can have these ideas across the industry which everybody wants to promote. You rely on symbols or imagery to create brand personality. So you'll see that so many high-tech companies and products, they have very user-friendly names. Apple, it's so user-friendly, you just take a bite out of it. Chery is the name of an electric car manufacturer in China. Now contrast that with another specific high-tech industry, which is biotechnology and drugs and pharmaceuticals. The names are so difficult. Lucentis, Avastin, these are so technically oriented and they don't mean anything to anybody. So I think our Silicon Valley tech industries do a much better job of branding than some of the drugs and pharmaceuticals companies. Now you must engage in internal branding, that is, your employees must be really proud of your brand. Then they can be good ambassadors. You have to effectively manage all points of contact or touch points with customers. The first contact they might have is with your website. And along the way, they may have downloaded a white paper, they may have attended a webinar, they might have called for some tech support. All these are touch points, and you must make sure that you try to minimize the negative interactions and maximize the positive interactions. And then finally, two important types of branding are co-branding and ingredient branding. So I don't have the example here, but co-branding is any two brands appearing on the product and the packaging. So you can have Apple and Microsoft marketing a bundle at the holiday Christmas time. Apple laptop coming with free Office software. So that would be an example where they are two independent brands, but for a limited time period, they have a partnership to do co-branding. And ingredient branding is a subset of co-branding where the product cannot function without the ingredient. So the example is of Android and Samsung both appearing on the handset. When you boot up Samsung, if you see the screen and it says Android, then that's co-branding. But the fact is that the smartphone, Samsung phone, cannot function without the ingredient of the operating system. So that's a special case. And there are pros and cons of each of those. So those are some of the issues very important in branding, which is a strategic marketing tool for competitive advantage. Does anybody have any closing thoughts on branding? We have about 3 minutes. If you would like to get any comments or observations or questions in. Have you seen any examples of exciting branding or some ad campaigns that have caught your attention in recent weeks? Again, I'm inviting any closing thoughts. Any of these chapters that we've covered today, distribution, pricing, communication tools, branding, any closing thoughts at all? Please write them in the chat box. Okay, it looks like there are no closing thoughts or comments or questions that you have. So I'm going to formally conclude lecture 3. And I just need a 2-minute break to make a quick pit stop. And I'll be back then to talk about introduction to the case method. So let's take a very short 2-minute break and I'll be right back. Okay, so now I'm back and we're going to do this next segment, which is introduction to the case method. So the first thing I would like to do is check the team formations, and I do have a spreadsheet here that Hannes had provided. So I'm going to share that with all of you. Please give me a minute. Let me try to expand this. Right. So here we have 12 teams. So the most important thing is, I hope each one of you knows which team you belong to, right? So the first case is on Amazon, and I believe that is due on November 11th. Is it? 3 weeks from now. Let's see what the date is. Seminar 1. Yes, 7th of November. I'm sorry. The first case, Amazon, is due on 7th of November. So the first 4 teams that will be presenting are Team 1, Team 2, Team 3, and Team 4. These teams will submit a video, and I'll get into the specifications on that. And the other teams will submit written memos. Okay. Right. Sana has reminded me that the deadline is 31st of October. That's for your submission, but we will discuss it in the seminar on 7th of November. So thank you for pointing that out. Sana is right. You please stick to the deadlines that are in Moodle. So you have to upload your memo or your video by the 31st of October. And then on 7th of November is when we discuss it online. Okay, so does anybody have any questions just on the team formation? It's very important that you know which team you're in. The first 4 teams will do the video on Amazon. Teams 5, 6, 7, and 8 will do the video on Tesla. And then the last 4 teams will do the video on HubSpot. So if that is quite clear, then I'm going to go next to sharing the syllabus with you. So I hope now you can see the syllabus document, and this will have all the dates. Case assignments and related seminars. The deadlines for the written case reports are the following. Amazon is on 31st of October. Tesla is on 21st of November. HubSpot is on the 5th of December. And also the videos have to be uploaded on that day as well. Now, there's a lot of information that I need to give you in terms of your preparation. So the first thing I'd like to say is that cases are handled in very different ways by different instructors. And so what I'm going to go over now is specifically with regard to this course and these 3 assignments. There is another business case later on in the semester, and that's a live business case, and that will be, the instructions for that will be provided by my colleague, Sana Katerina Askiainen. And this what I say today doesn't apply to that case. It's only for these Harvard cases. And here are the specifications. Written report should be 3 pages. And I'll go over again what the content of those 3 pages are. And then there's to be a video presentation, no more than 15 minutes. Now, the videos, they do take a lot of work. So please, I hope you've already got an early start of it. Use some simple tools. You know, I myself, I've used QuickTime. I've used iMovie to edit. I've used Camtasia. So there are some very simple video tools that are available. You can upload your video either in YouTube or in Vimeo. And then when you submit your paper, just tell me which link, give me the link of that, and then I'll be able to link to your video. Be creative about the videos. There are many different ways of making it interesting. Think of it as close as possible to a live presentation. But we are doing it by video because we feel that doing videos is an important marketing skill for everybody to have. And I only ask you to do what I've done myself. So this is a skill that you will appreciate when you start working. If your company doesn't have big budgets to hire an agency to do a video, you can try to do your own. Okay. And again, feel free to ask me questions about the assignment as I'm explaining it, anything that comes to your mind. So read carefully each assignment, and that means read it several times, highlight, many of these cases are long, and it's a lot of confusion initially. You have to separate out what's relevant from what is fluff. There may be many exhibits of hard accounting data, but it may or may not be relevant. So you have to pick and choose what you want to comment on. Right. We are very careful about plagiarism. So don't copy and paste things from other papers. Otherwise, you will be penalized, because Turnitin has a way of tracking whether there's an overlap with other documents. And really, we believe that this case analysis methodology will help you to develop your own thinking, managerial thinking. In business, we have to make so many decisions with limited information. And so that's what a case is. A case is an stylized account of facts. And that's why I say that there's no need to do any research outside the case. The case is self-contained, and I want you not to do external research, because there's two problems. One is you're being trained to make decisions with limited information. And the second is, just because you find that a company did something, it doesn't mean they did it the right way. So you could make suggestions in your assignment that are different from what the company has done, and they may be actually superior. So that's my reason for saying that there's no need to do outside research, but you can stick to what's in the case. Okay, now here's the real meat of it, the meat and potatoes. Let's go down to this, your assignment. And again, let me try to zoom in so it appears a little more clearer. You will prepare a 3-page report as if you were a staff member or a consultant advising the protagonist. Most of the cases, they will have some key decision maker. You have to identify that person carefully. Sometimes it will be easy because only one person is referenced in the case. But otherwise, there may be a cast of characters, and you have to see who is the most important person. Important not from the organizational hierarchy, but in terms of the decision making. Who is talking the most in the case? Who has been written about the most? Who seems to be at the center of the case? It's just like figuring out in a novel or a movie who's the hero and who's the villain, right? So whether it's a report or whether it's a video, your job is, as a team, you are either staff members or consultants to the protagonist. That person has asked you for help. Be aware that when you get into the world of real business, very often you will have a boss who says, we have a problem in this area. I don't quite know what the problem is, but please figure it out and tell me how to solve it. That's where this methodology really helps you. And that's why your report or your video should have 3 sections. Problem definition, that's from the point of view of the protagonist. What is she or he concerned with at the time the case ends? So you have to transform yourself into the time and location of the case. The case may have been written some years ago. You don't think you have to make recommendations for today in 2018. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the protagonist at the time the case ends. And all of your analysis and recommendations have to pertain to that time and space. So the number 2 is analysis, and analysis here is very specific. You have to come up with some alternatives to solving the problem, and you have to list their strengths and weaknesses or pros and cons. This is not a SWOT analysis. It may or may not be relevant. So choose the type of analysis that's relevant to the problem. Sometimes I get papers or videos which say, oh, any analysis means SWOT analysis. No, sorry, that's not true. Here you have to think, what's the problem? Are there at least two alternative ways of solving the problem? What are the strengths and weaknesses of A, and what are the strengths and weaknesses of alternative B? It's an analysis of alternatives, not an analysis of the company. Okay? And the third is, you have to make actionable recommendations which flow from the analysis and address the problem. So your recommendations have to be feasible within the time and budget constraints faced by the protagonist. And there has to be a very strong link between these three sections. The problem definition lends itself to alternative solutions which need to be analyzed. And then your recommendations can be one of the alternatives or a combination. And it should also address some implementation issues. If, for example, you are making a recommendation, then the protagonist will want to know how to go about implementing it. So these are the three that you have to address. 3 pages if you are writing a report, 15 minutes if you are doing a video presentation. And then on the day that the case is scheduled in class for Amazon, the day is 7th of November, we will raise additional questions, we will review some of the videos, and we will critique them in a constructive manner. And here is the rubric that I will use to grade your case assignments, both if it's a written report as well as a video presentation. How is the structure? Did you follow the structure that I've just told you? Problem definition, analysis of alternatives, recommendations. Have you used correct, simple English sentences that can be understood? The second section is creativity. Have you identified the problems correctly? Have you been creative with respect to the solutions? Then the analysis, has it been communicated effectively? And then finally, what's the feasibility? Have you considered both long-term and short-term implementation issues? So this is the kind of guidance I would like to give you on the case assignment. Now I'm happy to pause and take any specific questions you have. So I've gone over the guidelines, I've explained what my expectations are. Now I'm open to addressing any specific questions you may have. Okay, so here's a question from Yenny. Should we use journals and other academic sources to support the theories and analysis? Yes, for sure. We've been discussing through all the lectures so many good theories and frameworks that are in the book and the videos and discussions. You're most welcome to use that. In fact, theory is one of the ways to bolster your analysis and your recommendations. So whatever you've learned in the course is fine. I don't need you to go outside that, but if you would like to, bring in some other material, that's up to you. It's extra work and you get no extra points. But if you do bring in additional references, please be sure to include them as citations. And then Hannah has a question. Do we address the consultative paper for a person we have identified in the case, so not to the management of the case company? So, I leave this up to you, Hannah. If it's very clear that there is only one protagonist and that's the default one, you can address it to the company. But my preference is for you to identify who the correct protagonist is and then address the paper or the video to them. They have asked you for help. Don't try to take on all the problems of the company, because the company has so many problems. Okay, I want you to focus on the problems facing the manager based on his or her role in the company. So again, Lisa Ann, yes, you can use theories and frameworks from outside the course. There's no penalty. But again, I think that there's enough within the course that you can allude to. So if you do use them, then please do make proper citations. And I don't give any extra points for doing that. I do like theory, but I think there's plenty of theory within the course that applies to these cases. Those are all great questions. Please do feel free to ask some more. I'm happy to stay and answer many more. Okay, Yenny, we have been working on the Amazon case, and after reading the course book, have had challenges to connect the book to the problem we address. So that's I empathize with that, but I do think that in the Amazon case, there's a lot of history, and then there's certain issues that Jeff Bezos is confronted with in 2018, and I do think you need to prioritize them. What are the things that he needs to address in the short term? What are the things that he needs to address in the longer term? And then when you get into those issues, you try to think of, if there are any helpful theories. I don't insist that you have theories to support. You could write a perfectly good paper, self-contained, based on the facts of the case. I don't want to force you to bring in theories, but if there are issues that, if the theories are very natural and they come to you while addressing some of the problems, then you should bring them in. And again, you have my email address, sanjit.sengupta@gmail.com. While you're preparing, if you come across any roadblocks or obstacles and you want to ask me and get any inputs, I'm happy to reply. I'll take about 24 hours to respond. But if you do have questions, then please do feel free to send them to me. I'm still here if you have more questions or clarifications that you would like to ask about the assignments in general. because the cases are challenging, it's not an individual assignment. Remember, you have a fantastic resource, which is the intellect of all your team members. So each of you has to read the case carefully, and then you have to have group meetings before you actually write the paper or before you make the video. And one thing I do see is that sometimes you delegate assignments to individuals, that you do one case, you do the other case, I'll do the third case. But I don't think that's a good idea. I think every case is complex enough that it needs the collective smarts of all the team members. And if you put your heart and soul into it, you will definitely learn more, and this will be extremely valuable in your careers when you have to make difficult decisions that involve large amounts of money and are largely reversible. I have taught cases for more than 30 years, and I still think it's the best way for us to train the managers of the future. Okay, I don't see any more questions. I'm going to wait another minute, and if there's nothing else, then I will close out this session. But I'll give you one more minute if anybody wants to put in any last minute questions, comments, observations. The topic is the case assignments, either the 3-page paper or the 15-minute video presentation. Okay, so I don't see, let me just check again. I don't see any more questions on the chat box. So I want to thank you for your patience. This has been a very long session, but I hope that we have been successful in answering your questions. If anything else comes up, please feel free to email me. Otherwise, I will wish you all a good night and see you back here in 3 weeks. Bye-bye.